Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and enough is enough. Who really created the TVA? Was it Victor Timely, a Kang variant who would later become He Who Remains? Maybe not this Victor Timely, but like a past one who didn't turn into pasta? Or is it Ouroboros, Obi the OG? Loki Season 2 Episode 4 has suggested the origins of the TVA were kind of a chicken and the egg situation of one engineer inventor inspiring another engineer inventor. But we're not really sure who inspired whom first. But ultimately, a handshake, anointed partnership through time that includes an individual defined by his refusal to take partners. That tells us something. I'm going to break down all the evidence this season of Loki has given us pointing to the true origin of the TVA. How did it begin, and what was it before it began? If you love OB as much as we do, we have an OB-inspired shirt design available at nerdriot.shop that really is the best way to support what we're doing here at New Rockstars. One thing I found interesting while rewatching the Loki Season 1 finale is that He Who Remains implicitly takes credit for the TVA, but he never explicitly states for the record that he built it or he was its founder. Like, take a look.
I weaponized Goliath, and I ended the multiversal war.
Once I isolated our timeline,
All I have to do is manage the flow of time and prevent any further branches. Hence, the TVA. Hence, the timekeepers in a highly efficient bureaucracy. Hence, ages and ages of cosmic harmony.
Yes, He Who Remains takes credit for managing the flow of time and preventing any further branches, which he does by ruling and regulating the sacred timeline by composing new pages from behind his desk in the Citadel, but he never actually says he was the architect of the TVA infrastructure. He just says, hence the TVA, as if to say, and obviously I would need an agency to maintain all of this for me. We should also note that even this backstory is dishonest because it leaves out Renslayer's contribution, which episode 4 reveals was significant. She was the commander of this Kang variant's army, and I suspect the partner who helped him tame Goliath, because He Who Remains indicated that only through Goliath was he able to end the multiversal war. Goliath was the weapon that no other Kang variant had. Episodes 3 and 4 of Loki suggest that He Who Remains' true origin was not in the 31st century, as he said all of his other Kang variants had, but really in the 19th century, 1860s Chicago, on the sacred timeline. I have speculated that Victor got there by some other Kang variant, perhaps kidnapping a Kang baby from the 31st century and then hiding him, maybe other babies, throughout sacred timeline history, waiting to activate one of them. And this young Victor was activated with the TVA guidebook. In episode 3, our current Victor Timely told Renslayer that the book formed a link between him and OB.
This book has defined the course of my life. I like to think of it as a correspondence between myself and the visionary author, Ouroboros.
And then the two meet in episode 4, and it's wonderful.
Ouroboros,
Yeah, that's me.
you wrote the TVA handbook.
Well, yes, I did. But I learned everything I know from a brilliant 19th century inventor named Victor Timely. If he had the resources, he would have been bigger than Einstein.
That is interesting. How did he get this knowledge from Victor Timely? Did they know each other? Rather than it being an in-person partnership OB and Timely could have ever had, I think OB just came across 19th century archived research of some historical figure unappreciated in his time, overshadowed by inventors like Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and then after this by thinkers like Albert Einstein, Werner Heisenberg, J. Robert Oppenheimer. But when and where really did OB come across these writings? What was the state of the TVA? Was this when he was already in a fully functioning TVA? And was this TVA doing something different at that time, unaffected by any possible Kang variant? Because I don't think OB has ever left the TVA. Like, while other TVA employees were past variants brought into the TVA, susceptible to memory wipes and pruning, something tells me that that's not the case for Ouroboros. He is part of the TVA clockwork in ways that other employees are not. Like, he's the only one who has this patch of these 3 little gears. Like, I would say OB actually better fits the bill of the original He Who Remains in the comics, who was not a Kang variant. He was just an elderly TVA employee, the last TVA employee charged with monitoring the timekeepers. OB just kind of feels like the old guard, doesn't he? Hey, big news for those of you who already know and love Honkai Star Rail. It's coming to PS5 with seamless cross-platform data sync. Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Honkai Star Rail, in case you weren't aware, is the massive free-to-play space fantasy RPG from HoYoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. And now you can play anytime, anywhere, play from your couch when you're home, and carry your save with you in your pocket when you head out. If you haven't played Honkai Star Rail yet, yet, now's the perfect time to start. This game is gorgeous. It's endless explanation and combat with dozens of unique expressive characters. Right now, Honkai is introducing Topaz and Numbi as a limited time 5-star character, so I might have a new personal fave. It's gonna be hard for me to part with Jingliu because I'm a sucker for a big ass sword. Honkai Star Rail is also introducing a new plotline that will take you to Belobog, a city that's been called the last bastion of mankind against the eternal freeze. There's so much to do in Honkai Star Rail, and if you download it now, you can get 50 free Stellar Jade using the redemption code in the description. Log in for 7 out of 10 days, and you'll also earn Star Rail special passes that you can use to draw Jingliu or Topaz. In this episode, Loki poses the chicken and the egg question, and we kind of end with Obi coming to this kind of realization, it seems like.
So if your work is based on his work and his work is based on your work,
Exactly which came first.
It's like a snake eating its own tail.
A snake eating its own tail is what an Ouroboros is in mythology. He was named after this concept of what he is. He who remains and other Kangs are defined by their mistrust of partners, but Obi and Victor seem to truly admire each other.
I was living in your engineering descriptions.
Me? The way you explain the electric bypass system.
Bypass.
Poetry, just poetry.
And Victor Timely turns Sylvie's head when he does this.
Mr. Ouroboros, if anyone can, it's you and me.
He shakes Obi's hand. Victor Timely shook off Renslayer's hand when she tried to form a partnership in episode 3. We've only really seen Kang variants do this when they see an equal, like in He Remains backstory from the season 1 finale, when they formed initial partnerships with each other before stabbing each other in the back. So, back to our question. Who came first? Who invented the TVA? Well, I think we're really setting ourselves up for failure to think about this causally, like one thing causing the other. I think the TVA has always existed in some form, looping further and further backward in time for eternity. And these two men, when it comes to the modern TVA and what the modern TVA does, really just inspired each other. But the thing is, I don't think the TVA was always like this. Isn't it interesting that in episode 1, Loki time slipped back to an earlier era in Obi's past, when Obi was not wearing glasses? I think that was an earlier era of the TVA, before Ouroboros had ever heard the name Victor Timely, before the Kang War ever really happened. Between Victor Timely and Ouroboros, only one of them has been depicted as truly immortal. Like, Kangs seem to be destined to die and to respawn, but Obi, it seems, never dies, never gets his memory wiped. Obi is the constant. Victor and the other Kangs are variables, but Obi can have new ideas, new influences, new memories. I believe Obi is the original He Who Remains, the creator of the architecture of the TVA, or at least its eternal caretaker. But something changed. The Kang multiversal war broke out and drew in the TVA. It took over this architecture and repurposed the TVA from its original function to what it does now, prune and loom. But what was its original function? I believe the TVA was originally designed to let it flow and to bridge the gaps. Let me explain what I mean by this. The natural order of reality is not one pruned timeline. The natural order of reality is a multiverse. Victor Timely even states this.
My temporal loom inverts the temporal decay of the electricity flowing through it, lowering its entropy and gathering it into fine threads of power!
Entropy is defined as the measure of disorder in the universe, based on the assumption that due to the universe rapidly expanding outward and outward, that the universe is just moving to a state of disorder. It's the natural state of things to be chaotic, to be unruly, to be an untamed multiverse. So the temporal loom is unnatural. It's kind of like the hydroelectric dam on a river or a lake. That's not how the water is supposed to flow. The loom disrupts nature. Think of Obi's original TVA as a network of bridges, some kind of inner hive or matrix designed for the multiverse to connect with itself in an orderly and healthy way. Bridges. Contrastingly, I think the post-Kang TVA was turned into a dam, something to stop the flow of water and turn it into a practical use to do other things that eventually deplete fresh water. I believe the original TVA's function under Ouroboros was to maintain and grow a thriving multiverse network, to connect variants with each other, to foster things like a council of reeds, a community center where variants could just kind of hang out and do things to enrich the multiverse. You could say a wholesome version of what Miguel O'Hara is claiming he's trying to do. I just think OB was a longtime OG caretaker of this utopian network. But then the Kangs went to war in the 31st century, and one of those Kangs altered history with a variant in the 19th century that ended up writing some stuff that influenced OB into thinking that the right way of doing things was order. order in the form of one timeline. And that's why I think Sylvie sensed something wrong with Victor's handshake with Ouroboros. This isn't meant to blame OB, he's a sweet-natured tinkerer, and if not for a Kang variant influencing his thinking, all of reality would be in a healthier, more natural state of a multiverse. It wouldn't view things like incursions as violent acts, but just as a way for universes to shake each other's hands. So while this relationship is really a chicken and the egg deal, where both men definitely inspired each other, I think OB built the original architecture, and the Kang variants took it over and retold it and weaponized it. So let me know what you think about this theory. Comment down below with your thoughts. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network and support us by grabbing some merch at nerdriot.shop. You can follow me on all social platforms at Erik Voss, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.